And basically, you had like an intro before all the links to the different chapters because you had just finished pretty much all of them at that time, or maybe there were still 2 more to come, but there were like 19 or 20 on there. And your intro was like, "Yo, so look, I was just gonna do a quick like 2-parter on this, and got crazy, fam. So here it is." And I'm looking at this, and there's like 10 likes on it, and I'm like, all right, I mean, were people looking at this, or did they just write it off because the basketball guy wrote it? I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give this a look. And I would literally like read a chapter like this on my phone, like in the one room, and it would take me like an hour, and then I'd like get up, and I'm just like,
oh god, I'm
like walking around like, no. I'm like, this guy went back to like the Treaty of Versailles.
We did do that, yeah.
And what happened? Please walk me through this. It's so great to finally have you here. I have shouted this out for years, and people need to know about your work because you're getting back in the game with it now. But what happened?
All right, so I was writing about the NBA for years, and I just have an oddity that I do not like to be lied to. We can psychoanalyze me about that if you want, but like it doesn't sit well with me. And so I always was a little tripped up in the like the NBA was kind of a front door for me to see like billionaires and how they behave. Because essentially the league offices work at the behest of 30 billionaires.
That's
so
right.
There were just kind of a bunch of stories I was involved in. I ran a big team that was like investigative and stuff. And we kept running into this like kind of just... So I got a little annoyed at like, what are these billionaires doing, you know? And so then at the time we were relaunching True Hoop post ESPN, I did a big investigation into the oligarch Mikhail Prokhorov, who owned the Brooklyn Nets.
Yes.
And that was hairy. That was crazy. I went to one of the things I did was go to this like secret meeting invite only called Putin Con, which was like 200 feet below the surface of Manhattan. And like when everyone there's like the FSB has already hacked all of our phones, and like, you know, but these people talking about how Putin works, right?
Yeah.
And the system, and like I learned so much at Putin Con and in that whole investigation. And like one of the things became like to like what Putin generally does, right? And his oligarchs is like they have a public game of like patriotism and rah-rah, but privately they are taking, I forget the number, but it's like $5 to $10 billion a month for 20 plus years just out of Russia. And then they want to park it somewhere where it can't be seized if Putin loses power.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So they were parking it basically with blue chip American companies. They're buying like Citibank stock and stuff, right? But through a network that's hard to follow, right? And so, and for reasons that are complicated, you really can't move that amount of money out of Russia into this without the mob participating.
The Russian mob.
Yeah. So you get in this, like if you have a business that's going at all well in Russia, you're going to hear from your local mobster. You're going to cut them in, and you're going to cut the intelligence agencies in. And like together they have this beautiful thing going. And like, but so that's fine. But their money ends up at places like Apollo Global, right? And so like our financial system, the global financial system used to be 1% offshore money, and now it's 10% of all money is offshore money.
That almost seems low, but
yeah,
it's
I agree.
crazy. It's a crazy number.
But if you're raising money, if you're like you're raising a fund,
Yep.
right? Like you can't ignore this money, right? This is where the big easy money is. This is where law firms get their money. Like this is important money. And then, you know, as I'm kind of going through this like Putin learning process, I was like, it seems like that whole story. Once you get this offshore money in big amounts, it kind of overlaps a lot with arms trade and with the drug trade and with BCCI and with like all this stuff you've been talking about. Once you get to that, you're like, oh my God, like this system kind of is our system.
Yes.
And so then I was like, all right, well, and then the Epstein story started popping up more and more interesting ways. And I was just like, I gotta figure this out, right? I gotta figure out how this ties to the NBA.
Yeah, I was looking at a date stamp right before you came here. The initial like first story you did on it before you went and did your series was 2 days after he was arrested. So you were on it right away.
I remember the day that I said to a friend of mine, and by the way, at that time, everyone in my life was like, what are you doing? You know, like what? Like what?
You write about basketball.
Yeah, like
Henry.
what are you doing? And also just like, I mean, a bunch of people were like, are you gonna get killed? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think I would be like 7th on the list at the highest,
right.
You know, maybe much lower.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, if the world is as up as I think it might be, then Epstein's just gonna die in custody, right? I said that to a friend, And then like I was waiting. My daughter was in a theatrical thing, Riverside Church in Harlem, and I was double parked outside the church waiting to pick her up, and then my friend calls me. He's like, "They killed him in prison." And I'm like, "What?" like I kind of just said that. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really believe that. But I said that. I did say that, and then I was like, "Oh." That day, I was definitely like we need to understand what the is going on here. Like we just do as humans. Like we got to get a handle on this.
Hey guys, 3 quick things. Number 1, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It's a huge, huge help. Number 2, if you'd like to join my Patreon for early uncensored releases of the full episodes, you can join via the link in my description or in the pinned comment below. And number 3, if you'd like to join my clipping community for a chance to make content from the show and make money, you can join via the Discord link in my description below. Can I actually go back a step to what you were saying at the beginning there, though, before we even get to Epstein? Because we're going to run through your investigation. We'll probably have to have Henry back because we ain't fitting this into 3 hours. But, when you talk about the correct leaps, I might add, and that it's been proven that you made when you started looking at Prokhorov when he owned the Nets and getting around some of these other groups that you didn't even know existed, to where you said money's going offshore, it's being laundered through the mob intelligence agencies and then goes to like legitimate places like Apollo Global and stuff like that. But you then tied it directly to these people are doing arms deals and some of the things that, people could get their heads going like, oh my God, is this like the Illuminati?
We sound like the crazy ones. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's now been exposed in the emails that there's things I would have previously thought were a little crazy that it's like, well, this isn't so crazy. But the guy, Prokhorov.
Yeah.
That was so interesting because he was like a flash in the pan. It's funny you bring him up. Now you have, I believe, a Chinese billionaire who owns the Nets. Mm-hmm. So he sold to him a few years ago. But I remember this dude like coming up and he's like, I met with Carmilla. I looked in his eyes and said, come play for the Nets. And then he went to the Knicks. But like he was this flashbang like hand grenade into the NBA and then he was gone. Was there something behind the scenes there to where he got pushed out? And did that have anything to do with some of these groups you were looking at?
There's so much behind the scenes with every oligarch, I think, really. I mean, there's so much. There was one thing that really blew my mind about how he exited the NBA, which was there was an executive associated with him who was traveling China, like looking to drum up, I heard, a deal to sell the Nets. I was like, well, why do you care? Like, why do you care where the owner's from, right? But the deal is like China's the country that Russia's scared of. So like everyone in Putin's sphere is worried about having all their assets just taken by Putin, right? Like he can un-oligarch you anytime he wants, right? But the idea is like basically you cut a deal with someone who's holding it in China, then he can't touch it. It's safe there, right? Putin has no sway in this giant militarized country that he has like a 2,000-mile border with, right? So the idea is like have someone who's ultimately protected by the Chinese government purchase it so that your purchase is secure.
And then do you bank it in China?
I don't really understand what happens after that. But so I saw that report.
Interesting.
And then I talked to everybody I knew involved and I was like, wait, did they like seek out a Chinese buyer? And I was like, no, I don't know why you'd say that. I'm like, are you sure? Because he found a Chinese buyer. Yeah. But I don't. That was interesting to me. I never really got to the bottom of it, but there's so much like, cause there's a guy, Prokhorov, before all of this, Prokhorov's like oligarch buddy who kind of like navigated the early days of oligarchy were like very dangerous. Oh, yeah. Right. And he was in the most dangerous businesses, right? Aluminum and nickel and stuff. And he had a Harvard educated kind of Russian American partner, who maybe got a little big for his britches and started cutting some big aggressive deals. And the idea was you're supposed to kind of get permission from like the higher ups before you go making these big deals. But he was kind of a Western mindset businessman and he started cutting these big deals and then just found his body in his vacation house. Like dude was murdered. Yeah. And
that's a problem for Adam Silver.
Well, that was before. And then let's not forget Prokhorov first made news. Not for anything to do with the NBA, but he was in the international headlines because he was accused by French authorities of trafficking a whole plane full of women that he was like bringing to the Alps to have sex with all of his friends. And then, and Prokhorov was like, that's absurd. We're just partying together. Like, but like they somehow got an apology or whatever. But
Oh my God, are they all just sex traffickers, dude?
Sure.
Like, how hard is it? You're a billionaire. You got to traffic. Like, that's what I mean. It just seems like cowardly, that so many of them are doing this stuff.
My take is, so, do you know who Catherine Belton is?
It doesn't ring a bell.
You should get her on this show.
Okay.
Catherine Belton is an absolute genius wizard hero. Like, she wrote this book called Putin's People. That's like, she's at face to face with the oligarchs and like grilled them, and she like knows her stuff, and she didn't back down. Then they sued her in London because one part of her book they said was wrong, and her publisher had her back, and they had a big thing, and they changed like the most minor wording. But I'm like, okay, you guys, the oligarchs met and tried to figure out how to shut up Catherine, and their biggest weak point in her book was like this page, right? Meanwhile, other page of the book says Putin was involved in the cocaine trade. Like, but they left that one alone.
Yeah, they're like, that is okay. The CIA deal cocaine too.
Yeah. But her, like, in the end of her book, there's a little part about like oligarchy has changed and like how the new oligarchs work. And her thing is basically just compromat on everyone. Like, you don't get to be senior if you're not on video doing something terrible.
That's right. Spring is in the air, the weather is warming up, and summer is right around the corner. And I, for one, can't wait to be spending some days at the beach. And you know what I won't have to worry about during those long, hot days at the beach? Body odor. You know why? Because I have Mando. Mando Whole Body Deodorant takes care of exactly what it says it does. Your whole body. Unlike other deodorants that wear off when you sweat after a few hours, with Mando, you put it on at the beginning of the day and you don't worry about it ever again. Their whole body deodorant is also safe to use anywhere on your body. That includes pits, balls, thigh folds, belly buttons, butt cracks, and feet. And we're talking about a product here that was originally created by a doctor who saw firsthand how BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. So he invented a deodorant that could block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. And today, Mando has different product options for whatever floats your boat. There's a solid deodorant stick, which is formulated and powered by mandelic acid to stop odor before it starts. And then there's the spray deodorant, which is aluminum-free and ideal for hard-to-reach places. And today, when you go to shopmando.com, you're going to get a deodorant that's clinically proven to control odor better than Old Spice. Some men mask their BO with scents. Mando men get the job done right. Don't mask it. Mando it. Head on over to shopmando.com. That link is in my description below, because for a limited time, our customers are going to get 20% off site-wide using our exclusive code Julian. So use code Julian at shopmando.com for 20% off today. That's shopmando.com. Link in description below. Mando's got you covered with deodorant plus sweat control. Say goodbye to sweat stains and hello to long-lasting freshness. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you.
So to me, this is probably why I don't even think like this sex trafficking, I think, is part of it. It's just like, look, if you're trying to raise money for your business, like, great, come party with me in the Alps. And if we end up with you on video, we might give you a loan, right? But if we don't get you on video, we can't have you.
Give you a loan.
We can't have you on we're not interested in you in our portfolio if we don't have total control of you, right? We have to be able to end your career. Like, those are the conditions.
That is the most ass backwards thing ever. It's like, be a horrible person and you win. Don't do it. You lose.
So John Kiriakou was in this chair, or was he in that chair? This chair?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I can't believe that they didn't notice this. I'm like, no, I think you have to do that. It's not that, like, this wasn't a screw up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is how you get in the club. It's a criminal organization. And you don't get in by being like, oh, I'm good at business. You know, like you get in by getting on video.
And that's the other thing. I these intelligence organizations, one thing that seems to be pretty clear is they are extremely good at psychological profiling. And I mean that for like their own people as well. And knowing John for a long time and knowing his stories and talking with him so much on air, off air, he got high up over there.
Yeah.
But it is so clear to me that they would have pegged him as, hey, he's a serious dude and he can accomplish serious missions, but we cannot bring his way because he'll never stand for it. That's why I was always surprised that they tried to bring the enhanced interrogation to him. And of course he famously said off right away, but like, that's the lightest of what we're talking about here. Some of the other stuff I genuinely think he never saw, because they wouldn't have brought a guy in like that.
Yeah.
But the reality is all these intelligence organizations around the world, they have what are the definition of dark alliances. And it's very, very strange.
It's not okay. Like,
No.
I mean, well, look, I'm not going to say I know how to run an intelligence organization. I'm just saying that, like, the stuff that we don't know isn't the stuff that you'd be like, oh yeah, that checks out.
Right.
You know, like, the stuff you'd be like, holy. I mean, these stories, like, this is definitely the part of the story I know the least about, but these, like, kind of increasingly convincing reports about, like, satanic rituals
Yep.
and ritual murders and stuff, like what the,
I know.
it's the darkest. It's like, if you put it in a movie, they'd be like, it's not believable.
Exactly.
It's too dark. You know?
Yeah, there's stuff that I have had since the January 30th drop and really going through those emails. There's some stuff that is still not proven, but the fact that now it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Number one, I have to say that's a possibility. And number two, you got to apologize to some people who were like, yo, some of it's real. And I'd be like, do we have evidence? Well, now we got evidence.
Yeah.
You know, if there wasn't some before that I missed. And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. Like, what do you think it is that gets a fellow human being who most of these people are obviously wealthy, had access to education, you know, obviously like intelligent individuals that way. Not that that has anything to do with good or evil, but you would think there's some level of like, well, this seems crazy. Like, what do you think it is that gets someone to push themselves over that cliff to do not even necessarily the worst like that, but some of this stuff, be it the sex trafficking or, you know, just total manipulation of and abuse of minors and stuff?
There's a lot. I think a lot goes into it. A long time ago, in a whole another life, basically, I taught sex ed. I taught like don't even get me, whatever. I had to read a bunch of stuff on this, right? And like one of the things is that like pedophilia, like apparently there are not a tremendous number of people who have like fantasies about sex with a child. Instead, what happens is a lot of people find adults troublesome, right? Like you're in a equal power relationship and you have to kind of negotiate. It's a little bit of a dance. Like, do we get to have sex or not? Or do we get to do what I want to do or you want to do? But the people who end up with children are that power hungry, right? They're the ones who like can't stand guff, right? And this is exactly how the stories are, right? Like the anecdotes and the reports are like, you know, I said, give me a blowjob and you didn't. And so I'm going to slap you, right? Like, so to me, I think a lot of it is like, these are blatantly power hungry people, right? They just can't fathom any sort of slowing down on the road from here to what they want, right? Whether that's sex or a certain meal or to be on this vacation or whatever, right? They're just like private jets everywhere. We're just going, no delays. And so I think that's a big part of it. But then also like a huge factor in who's a pedophile is people who were victimized as children. And so in some of these cases, I think it's just, there's like these, this is where it's kind of the European part of the story, I think, where there's like, I do think there are these like, you know, where did I see somebody rolled through just like all of the pedophiles who were around the royal family? Like it's just the ones that we know about is a lot.
It's a lot.
So what's going on there? Like, I think what's going on there is that it's absolutely the furthest thing from a meritocracy. Your greatest fear in the world is that you would just like open the doors and everyone compete for the job, right? So you have to have, you know, somebody won the right to run the monarchy a gazillion years ago, and they're trying to pass that down through generations that have no business. Like they're just not worthy.
Right.
So like, how do you keep that thing, that power structure together? And I think they've been using pedophilia as like a repeated generational tool. And it works because if you abuse this one, then that one becomes an abuser. It's like, it's so sick. But I think that in some of these people, I think are coming from that, right? There's just so many stories of effed up childhoods among these people. And then I guess there's, I mean, we know the CIA has done a lot of research. I'm sure every intelligence on, you know, how to get people to do what you want. And this is one of the tools that they know about, right? So presumably that's another driver.
Yeah. No, I think everything you say there is not crazy, unfortunately. And I think there's something to it. And, you know, we have to now open our minds to some of these possibilities within power structures. And it's not to say, therefore, everyone who's associated with this, or that is therefore guilty. But the air of suspicion around how things work needs to be very, very strong moving forward from society, because now we've seen some sort of lens into it. But the other part with the oligarchs that you were talking about, with how they would get the money offshore, I'm just knowing the investigation you ended up doing with Epstein that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Obviously, you were able to tie a lot of this together. And my my guy Alessi Alaman, who Deef was telling you about earlier, who did the documentaries, like, you know, I turned him on to your work like 3-4 years ago, and that's what he was blown away with. He's like, Henry just was able to tie these different institutions and where the money's flowing and all that. So obviously you got a baseline of that from working these other stories. Can you give me, you know, without, I guess, like confidential details or whatever, can you give me some examples of like how that would happen when you describe the money would be moved from the oligarchs through the Russian mob, through intelligence agencies, through like Apollo? Can you just give like an example of that so we have a baseline?
Yeah. Well, what a really well-documented version of this is like Panama in the heyday of like cocaine, right? So they would literally collect money. They had a system of like, you know, they'd sell cocaine all over North America, and there'd be like a married couple that lives in a house with a fence. And like, and then, you know, all the people would drop off their money at that house and they'd accrue it in the garage. And then they purchased, I forget the name of it, but like one of these like freight companies. They purchased the drug dealers owned one of America's big freight companies, and they would like load up all this money. They take it to some airline that I think they also invested in. Like it was like Eastern Airlines is one of them, and then fly it all to Panama. And then when the money lands at Panama, there's like a branch of practically every major global bank right there near the airport. So the Panamanian army protects the monies. It goes right to like whichever bank you prefer. And then it's like, boom, now it's in Citibank, right? Now it's in like whatever major institution, right? And then later we learned that the CIA, like, you know, they were meeting with the people involved all the time, right? So
I had someone sitting in the chair who did that.
Yeah, see, there you go. There you go. So there's that version of it. Okay, and then in Russia, it's a little different where, you know, basically you're an oligarch and you've been given the right to purchase, like in Prokhorov's case, a giant, I think it's like the biggest nickel company in the world, Norilsk Nickel, for a fraction of what it's worth. Then you take it over, you start running it, and you just start throwing off all these profits. And then I don't know what his banking habit was. I mean, he ran a bank before, so he probably had pretty good bank ties. But you could go to Deutsche Bank, certainly. You could walk into the Moscow office and say, hey, man, I've got like quite a lot of money that I'd rather have in another country. And there are all these rules preventing this, but you could do, they got in trouble for this thing called mirror trades, where basically you'd go in, let's say you go into the Deutsche, I think I have this right. You'd go to the Deutsche Bank office and say, I own, you know, 500,000 shares of this Russian company that trades on this stock exchange. And all these facts are probably wrong. Trades on a stock exchange somewhere else in Europe. And so you'd like sell them in Moscow. Meanwhile, in another city, another person from the same bank would purchase an equivalent amount of stock at the same price. And so like, because the bank trusts each other, like you really have just moved a whole crap ton of money out of Russia. And like people went to prison for this. Like this was like a known thing that these global banks were facilitating. There's a million others. Actually, this book, Moneyland by Oliver Bullock, is like,
Money. I haven't heard of that.
Oh,
one.
It's good, man. It's
All right,
good. Basically, you move the
alley.
money into Moneyland. It's not in a country anymore.
Moneyland.
It just goes to Moneyland.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah, that's a really good
Shout
one.
out Oliver Bullock, you said?
But I think it's Bullock. I think he lives in Wales. He's a great guy.
The inside story of the crooks and kleptocrats who rule the world. And he wrote this in 2019. Something tells me this is going to be like a harbinger of what was to come in a way. Wow.
He was a big, like, there's several others, but like he was one of the people who was like really like made me kind of understand better. Like I dare anyone to read that book and say that he's like a crazy person making stuff up. Like he's like very sober and evidence-based.
Well, that's what I liked about you too, because when I was reading this, it was funny. Like you'd be writing this amazing thing, but then you'd be having a conversation with the reader. Like, I know this sounds crazy, but please look at this source here, look at this source here, look at this source, and then and I'd go look at it. I'm like, God damn, nah, he ain't fucking kidding, bro. Just bagged up like 4 layers. Like, damn.
Well, thank you for being a careful reader. I feel like a lot of people are just like, I don't know, man, that sounds crazy. Like, you know, it just sounds crazy. Like. And mostly I'm an anti-conspiracy theorist. Like I am. Like most of my career, I'm just like, people would call me with like, "You're not gonna believe." Well, I'm like, guess what? I don't think so. Like, I just don't buy it.
Yeah.
Right? This is the only story I've ever encountered where it's like, no, the crazy version is the true version. Like, what?
Yeah,
the hell?
all of us classically trained conspiracy theorists, as my friend Mark Gagnon says, start as full anti-conspiracy theorists, and then something happens, and we're like, wait a minute, wait, where's that going? Holy shit!
Yeah.
But you actually, my friend David Satter, I had him in for episodes 92 and 133. He became the bureau chief for the Financial Times in the Soviet Union in 1976. He did?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar.
Oh, with the apartment bombings?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, that's an eye-opener.
Yeah, so talk about an eye-opener.
Yeah.
But he actually, there was a connection to you with him because when I had him in, I was reading one of his books afterwards, and he casually mentions this one-day war that happened. It was, I keep forgetting, I've told this on camera like 3-4 times. I keep forgetting to go relook this up to make sure I get it all right. But it happened in like Dagestan or something like that. And I want to say 1999 when Putin was consolidating power. And basically some version of the Russian army or something flew in for an hour, shot a few things, dropped a few bombs, and then flew out. And they were going to come back. But there was this negotiation that was, I think Deve's on it right here. The August-September 1999 invasion of Dagestan by Chechen-based militants led by Shamil Basayev and Ibn al-Qaitev triggered the Second Chechen War. So that might not be the same one because this one, like they were able to pull it back, whereas the Chechen Wars lasted a while, but it was Dagestan. And essentially the way that this one was cooled down was once they pulled out, there was some sort of meeting that was negotiated with Russian leadership and then the other factions as well, where they went to, I believe it was Nice, France. Okay. And he very casually put, to attend a meeting of the minds at Adnan Khashoggi's house. And I was like, it was like the Leo meme. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, that's the guy. That's the guy. And I found out about him from your report. So let's get into it now. Okay, let's do it. Because like you were revolutionizing some of these people that now everyone talks about that they weren't back in the day. So you, as we said, start this with, I'm going to find a connection between Epstein and Apollo. And then it goes kaboom. So just take me to day one. After you mentioned where you were when Epstein died and you really started going after this, but like when did you realize, oh my God, this is way more than I was looking at?
I mean, definitely an early concern of mine was this guy, A.B. Krongard. Buzzy. And I'm still blown away. Like, I feel like his name should be in everybody's coverage of the Epstein story all the time.
Agreed.
And I can't even probably remember off the top of my head all of the ties here, but let's just, to the best of our ability, 100% this guy is a CIA guy. Mm-hmm. And we know that he became, later in his career, he was appointed as the number 3, like the executive director of the CIA, and oversaw like the rendition program. And then he was the person who like gave all the deals to Blackwater. And then Blackwater put him on the board. Then he got in trouble with Congress because like the inspector general who investigated to see if it was crooked was his brother. His Buzzy's brother's nickname is Cookie. And like they put Cookie on the stand to like testify that his brother had nothing to do with Blackwater. And then they figured out during the course of the meeting, his brother had been at Blackwater's annual meeting as a board member. Anyway.
Eric Prince has sat in that chair.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's one of the...
He didn't know any of this stuff, but yeah.
He's one of the scariest out there. Don't get me started. But this guy, Buzzy, who is definitely in the CIA, and later was on the Apollo board, before all that was the banker who took Microsoft public. Like, he's literally the man who like made Bill Gates rich, who made Steve Ballmer rich, who made Paul Allen rich, and a bunch of other companies too, or went to their IPOs through his company. So, and there's another banker who was like, hey, during that period, he tried to recruit me to the CIA. So I'm like, okay, so I have to believe the most likely thing is that this guy's been in the CIA since college. There's some evidence of that. He kind of had some Nixon ties and stuff early. But so that means Microsoft went public via CIA. And it also means that when Apollo Global when Leon Black was paying Epstein, Apollo Global had a CIA person on the board, right? And later they had Jay Clayton, who had been a partner at Sullivan and Cromwell, which is kind of like notoriously the CIA's law
that's
firm.
the Dulles' old law firm.
Exactly right.
Yep. Remember when I had Mike Yeagley in here for episodes 343 and 351? And remember what he said that he used to do, allegedly used to do, and doesn't still do in some ways, but he definitely probably still does, about collecting your data and using it without you realizing it? And remember how he said that there are data brokers who make up one of the largest unseen industries on earth, who are constantly doing this every day with your data that you don't even know about? Well, yeah, that's kind of a problem. In Mike's case, he was looking at it from a national security perspective. In your case, you're looking at it from a privacy perspective, which is why you need to be using Protect My Data. Data brokers collect and sell your personal information online, but Protect My Data comes in and removes it from 300 plus data broker sites to reduce spam, scams, and identity theft. And if you don't think it could happen to you, well, last year Americans lost an estimated $196 billion to fraud, which means there's also probably a lot we don't even know about, Steve. And no, we're not just talking about the daycares in Minneapolis. It's far beyond that. There's even estimates that up to 278 million people in the United States last year had their data compromised. This can include sensitive information like your name, number, home address, and income, and it's all happening without you even realizing it. So take back control of your privacy today. Visit protectmydata.com, link in my description below, and use code Julian to get 30% off all annual plans and remove your information from data broker databases. That's protectmydata.com, link in description below, promo code Julian.
So to me, I'm like, well, this is like kind of a big, like, there's no way to just tell myself that there's nothing going on here when like this guy is in the middle of it all. So then I tried to like figure out, like, oh, in the middle of what?
Yeah.
We're still doing that, you know, still not totally didn't nail that yet.
You never get it fully untangled.
No.
You never get it fully untangled. But so you were essentially, again, starting with the ownership, and then almost, I'm trying to picture you doing this. You're like, okay, let's draw Apollo Global here in the middle, Epstein right here in the middle with them. We'll leave Epstein right there. And you're like, okay, who are the people on their board? Ooh, Buzzy Krongard, who's he? And then you're going like this.
Yeah.
And creating all these new decision trees of like, oh, he's connected to this guy and that guy. How do you put that all together and bring that back to Epstein?
Well, so pretty quickly, I'm trying to remember this time too. It got to Michael Milken, Drexel Burnham Lambert.
Oh,
was like a
please explain this to people. Yeah.
Okay. So everybody at Apollo, like Apollo was born out of the explosion of Drexel Burnham Lambert. So it's like, it's not, you don't have to take my word for it that this is a continuation of that. So Michael Milken was a trader at a big, you know, Drexel Burnham Lambert is a big New York City based investment bank, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, he convinced them that he should move his operation to Beverly Hills. Weird. And then they brought in like a bunch of billionaires who had felt rejected by the other banks, right? So they had like questionable money. Some of them kind of blatantly had mob ties. Some of them were, you know, we should talk about Ivan Boesky. Let's not forget that.
Okay.
Ivan Boesky is very important.
We'll pull up his Wikipedia.
Well, let's do that right now. Ivan Boesky is a great example. Ivan Boesky talked to Michael Milken every day. They would get up, Michael Milken got up early, and they talked every day.
It's also kind of, by the way, like you say the Beverly Hills thing is nuts. Like, why would you do that? It's also not to say there aren't some big asset management firms, like I believe PIMCO and some other ones that are based out of the West Coast. But you got to remember, market opens here in the U.S. at 9:30 Eastern. So these guys, you know, you're 3 hours behind out there, and you're in an industry that's like, you're supposed to be getting ready for the market at 7 a.m. They're getting ready at 4 a.m. You know, it doesn't make sense.
But there are the headquarters of giant arms companies, and there are lots of beautiful women.
Well,
and they would have these parties.
Boesky took a header last year?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
All right.
So, okay. This guy, this is every single Rocky turnover has like more interesting things. But okay, so Ivan Boesky was about as close as anyone got to Michael Milken. And he was a funnel. He had a bunch of money from before, which was very eyebrow raising how he got rich. But he was from, I don't think it would be a stretch to say possibly a mob family in the Midwest. His dad owned like strip clubs.
Right.
Then he went to college, and this is interesting. I think it's been removed from Wikipedia, but after college, he went to Iran because he had a great Iranian friend from high school. I think from high school. And he lived
this is in the 60s?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
he lived in Iran for a while, and then he came back, and then he got a pretty nice job in New York for the Rothschilds.
Yeah, LF Rothschild. There it is.
I don't think he ever graduated from college, but the Rothschilds were like, oh, he seems like a great guy.
Listen, they're really good at spotting talent that was overlooked.
So then he has all this money that from all these crazy investments he makes.
Oh, did you see this, by the way, Henry? Like, you're spot on. Although he lacked an undergraduate degree, he was admitted to Detroit College of Law, now Michigan State University of Law, and graduated from law. How do you...
Yeah.
You don't get a law... Maybe you do, and I'm like fucked up right now. But
I'm not aware of anybody else doing that. Yeah, and I understand he also, maybe it says here, but he gave a bunch of money to Harvard later, and so they kind of like
they knew how to pick him.
He had the ability to say something that Harvard-y that sounded like maybe he went to Harvard, but he didn't go to any of those schools.
Yeah.
But so then he so he has all this Iranian connections, and it's a ton of unexplained money. Okay, then I've not looked into this, but Whitney Webb, who I think as far as I can tell, she's a genius. Like maybe it's hard to verify almost anything she says, but I think she's dead on. But she's like, oh, well, the CIA was moving all this money through Iran, especially after Iran-Contra. There's also a bunch of
that's later, but
reports of Ari Ben Menashe was saying that basically the Israelis made all this money and they had to bring it through Iran. So anyway, a whole bunch of money came from Iran from this guy into Michael Milken's big pot of investor money. Interesting. So then, but then they started this thing. Leon Black was a young employee there. He was kind of seen as a ne'er-do-well. Well, he would party. They'd yell at him. He'd come in late. There'd be prostitutes in the office and stuff. And but his dad had friends who were all investors in Drexel Burnham Lambert. His dad, Eli Black, had purchased United Fruit, which was famously the CIA company, and then jumped or was pushed from the 44th floor of what was then called the Pan Am building. Was it now? It's called.
I think he did jump. I think he had really fucked up. That's one I actually think he committed. I mean, maybe he was pushed. Yeah. Maybe. I can't rule it out.
I don't know. He's not. Well, it didn't turn out well.
It did not turn out well.
Yeah. It's the MetLife building.
Now it's MetLife, but it was the Pan Am building at the time. Yeah. Deep's like, I walk there every day.
Well, look up,
So Black, I didn't know that though. Leon Black was a ne'er-do-well, considered a little bit of a fuck up.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a fuck up, and somehow that guy, I think his name's Jesse Kornbluth, the journalist who's written a lot. Jesse Kornbluth wrote this thing that I think everyone should think about more, which is that, according to him, Epstein targeted Leon Black back then. And was courting Leon Black. There was something about Leon Black that was especially attractive to Epstein back then. I guess this would be the 80s. Yeah, I gotta guess. So then Milken was...
He was the junk bonds guy,
was
right?
Well, that's what they say. He was a junk bond guy. But to people on Wall Street, that wasn't really his defining thing. His defining thing was that they pulled together these rogue billionaires and then Leon Black invented this thing called the highly confident letter. So basically they would write a letter Pan Am and say, hey, we have enough money to take over, they would purchase
corporate raider stuff.
Yeah, corporate raider stuff. And Pan Am would be like, well, I don't think you have that much money. So they would get, rather than some laborious process of putting all the money into an account, Leon Black invented well, we have a bunch of billionaires and we might be able to get it from any one of them. And so we're just going to write a letter that we're highly confident we can get the money. And it worked. So then they started writing these highly confident letters and taking over a whole bunch of big businesses, right?
It's like robbing a bank with a note.
It's like robbing a bank with a note. And then once you get control, I think this is an important part of the story, is it's one thing to be an investor. Let's say you got some, let's say you are Israeli intelligence and you really do have some money that you're worried someone's going to take from you. So you're going to give it to somebody, maybe Evan Boesky, and he's going to give it to Michael Milken, and then he's going to invest it in something that has a CEO, And like, you might feel like you don't have a lot of control over that money at that point, right?
Mhm.
But two ways that can get way better for you. One is if you get control of the end company, because you didn't just buy 20% of it, but you bought 51% of it.
Right.
Now you're in a lot stronger position. But two is if all those people along the way are on video doing terrible things, right? Like, that's another way to make sure that no one's going to steal your money in the end, right? You're just like, hey guys, are we all good here? Are we all? No one's going to, you know. So I think something like that. I'm not sure I described it chain of custody perfect, but I think like roughly those elements seem to be together. And then once you have that group of people with a lot of money and all on video doing terrible things, well, now we don't just have to limit ourselves to buying like publicly traded American stock, right? Like, that same crew is ready to go. Like, you can get into any industry in the world, and you're kind of advantaged in that you're like kind of locked together in this way.
I might be overthinking this, but in the process of basically like schlossing the money around, are they also creating effectively like shell companies to do this?
Oh yeah, tons. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
And I'll tell you, okay, this is like, so I'm like, well, why wouldn't you have drug money in this mix, right?
Right.
It's one of the biggest industries in the world. And drug dealers very much would like to get their money in. And that's another big moment for me was like the church committee. John Kerry, when he was like a young, newly elected official, ran this committee that.
Wait, John Kerry was on the church committee?
I think I'm totally lying. I think that
that's all right.
The church committee was before. I think that John Kerry ran a committee that looked into the cocaine trade in the early 80s. And they
like investigating himself.
But he had this guy, Milian Rodriguez, who was an accountant for the mob who got busted. And Milian Rodriguez like sat in that chair. You can read all the testimony online, and they just like, he's like, here's how it works. We have invested in like every blue chip thing you can imagine. It's like, the most mom and pop apple pie American stuff like we own, right? And he's like, you guys think you busted somebody and like, you got a guy whose Spanish is his first language and you think you got cleaned up now? He's like, let me tell the people coming after me, like they all went to Harvard and they're like, super buttoned up and like this money's not stopping, right? So I think that's what happened, right? It's like,
well, at least they're putting it back into the American economy. I can appreciate that.
There you go. That's the win.
Jesus Christ. What was the guy's name, the accountant?
Milian Rodriguez.
Milian Rodriguez. So yeah, you mentioned it though. The church committee was in the 70s. So I guess what you're talking about is like the early 80s or something with Kerry, but it's similar. It's interesting though with the church committee, Frank Church, I want to say his first name was Frank. He put that together and then he was primary.
Yeah, that's how that goes. Yeah, nobody likes that guy.
Very, very fascinating, right?
Nobody likes that guy.
Did you find something deep with this dude?
Yeah, it was Frank Church. I'm trying to find Milian.
It's like Milian.
And maybe John Kerry.
I think you can find it on TrueHoop probably.
But you said he was an accountant for the mob.
Yeah.
So they obviously had him, and he like
stuff.
flipped as a witness, kind of.
He I think that he was like getting into his plane. He liked to fly around. He lived in South Florida, and he was getting in his plane, and they like arrested him, and there was like pounds of cocaine in the plane. So
they did like the Frank Pantangeli thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I haven't heard of that one. That's interesting. We'll see if we can find it. That's a little bit of a.
I want to make it hard for Deef,
A what?
I want to make it hard for Deef. I want him to work.
If it's out there, he'll find it.
Okay, good.
The first podcast.
There you go.
Ramon got it already. Fucking unreal. The first podcast we went to do where Deef was taking over the seat, we had Mike Benz in here.
Yeah.
Who's like a document dump kind of guy. And before we start, Benz looks at me and I'm explaining what I explained to you, where I'm like, Deef can pull up anything on the screen. He's like, okay, great. And then he literally goes like this, and he turns to Deef. He's like, oh my God, I just want to apologize before we start. When I was on Joe Rogan last month, they were like, dude, you asked for too many links. So just if it's too much, whatever. And Deef's like, no, we're good. We got it. And I'm like, we are so fucked. This is his first podcast. I was like half the time I'm like looking over here. And then the podcast finished up and Mike Benz went over and shook his hand first.
Nice.
He's like, that was amazing.
That's got to be a good day for you.
But all right, we got it. So this is from Yeah, July 22nd, 1987. Drug trafficker testifies before Senate committee on, what was that title, Dave? Sorry, go. On CIA Nicaraguan Contra involvement in drug trade. Oh, so Henry, this might have been, maybe I'm fucking up the timeline, but this might have been when they did the official special prosecutor related to Contra. Remember that?
Maybe.
Because some of that overlapped with when Reagan had left office. I just don't know how long it went. There was like a podcast.
Hangover. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a podcast done by what? Oh my God, what's it? Serial or something like that? Like one of those where they do the series.
Yeah.
I listened to a few years ago and they were explaining this whole thing. But yeah, in late June, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee went into a secret 2-day session to take testimony from Cuban-American Ramon Milan Rodriguez. He is currently serving a 35-year sentence in a federal prison, reportedly in North Carolina. And it goes through who's interviewed. Milan Rodriguez said he was one of the supervisors of money laundering for the Ochoa Escobar cocaine cartel in Colombia, handling up to $200 million a month. On camera, he stated that he had been asked to launder through a Miami company cocaine money destined for the Contras. Wow. Later, Milan Rodriguez told the Senate committee that the contact was Felix Rodriguez. Why does he always come up? He comes up on every podcast. Rodriguez, a Bay of Pigs veteran, had long been associated with CIA counterinsurgency projects. Most recently, he was assigned to the Ilopango Air Base in El Salvador to supervise air supply drops to the Contras. Wow. So it's all tied together.
I mean, yeah.
It's crazy. So Drexel Burnham Lambert, you hinted at this earlier, it blew up on Black Monday effectively. And then like thereafter, because now that had to do with the junk bonds, right?
Yeah, it was Giuliani. Giuliani went after Michael Milken, and I don't remember exactly even what they got him on. But the part that interested me was, there's a thing I haven't really written about. It's too confusing. But so they owned, Drexel owned tons of bonds and tons of different things. And a lot of it really was garbage. But some of it was super valuable. And so, they were forced to liquidate all this stuff, and Milken goes to prison and everyone's out of a job. And then this French bank, Credit Lyonnais, which is super associated with Robert Maxwell. Probably it seems to be one of the places that like this, this big ball of offshore untrackable money was like an early beachhead of it, was Credit Lyonnais. According to the video that used to be on the Apollo Global website, it's Leon Black saying like, I just got a call out of the blue from these guys in France. They wanted to give us $4 billion. And so I flew over there and said, no, you have to give me $8 billion. Like, and that's
I want that call.
Yeah.
I want that call.
But that's how Apollo was founded. And then what they don't put on the video in the Apollo website is that in the aftermath, they basically snapped up a lot of the assets that Milken used to own, because Leon Black knew kind of which ones were the good ones.
Right, so he bought them low.
But then there was like a massive investigation of whatever happened there. And he was maybe going to get in real trouble. And I can find it. I have some notes on it somewhere, but the people who were the investigators of that, and this is back at the founding of Apollo, were like they're livid still, right? Like they were like they found bad evidence of bad stuff happening. They did not get to seek justice.
Are you getting at like some sort of insider trading type stuff or worse?
I don't even know. It was more just like there's all these arcane rules around what you have to disclose in the investment community, and my eyes like gloss over at that part.
Right.
That's where the part I'm like, I'm a basketball writer. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but boy, these people sure are mad.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wonder what it could be, because bonds get weird because it's, there's all different types of them, but a lot of times you're buying like local bonds for counties and cities and stuff, or you're buying federal bonds for governments. And I don't know. I was never, because I worked on Wall Street for 4 years, and I knew about insider trader cases and things like that were happening with equities, but bonds was such a weird world because it's so boring, to your point, that most people are just like, what are we doing here? And that I can imagine there's all kinds of shady shit that
I
happens
honestly
there.
think this is the worst. This is my memory from years ago on a topic about which I'm a complete buffoon, but I sort of have a feeling it might have been something like as they liquidated Drexel, they said that these things were worth nothing. And then they went and bought them up because Leon knew they weren't worth nothing. I think it might have been something like that.
Right. Almost like he had a source.
Yeah.
Someone that knew something. I do wonder about that because Milken's still a billionaire today. He did like 3 or 4 years in prison, you know, those worldwide speaking tours and everything. So it worked out for him. But I do wonder about the whole sacrificial lamb aspect to where it's like, ooh, we got a lot of things that we can work with here, but there's too much attention on this. So this is the guy everyone knows. Let's give him up.
You get too hot and you're no longer useful. Yeah.
Almost like they did Epstein, by the way.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, so who are the breadcrumbs behind that? So you correctly point out that Credit Lyonnais, is that how you say it?
I think the S is silent at the end of a French word. Yeah.
I don't have a good ear for French, but Credit Lyonnais, correct me in the comments. They call him up out of the blue and say, we'll give you $4 billion or something like that. And you mentioned that they were connected to Robert Maxwell, Guylain's father. So he had been doing his banking there for his companies for years?
So it's very confusing what he was doing, but I think that started to make sense for me when I read, I want to say Craig Unger. Have you read any Craig Unger?
Mm-mm.
Craig Unger is a baller. Like he's a no-joke journalist. He's written about a lot of the stuff that's in and around this story, but I think it was Craig Unger who had a story about Robert Maxwell helping Russian, like the KGB basically was like the Soviet Union's going to break up. And we don't, like, we might lose the nation, but we don't want to lose the KGB. So we're going to offshore all this money, put it aside, keep it safe, and then Russia can do whatever it does, and then we'll bring the money back. And Robert Maxwell apparently created like 600 companies to like hold all this money outside of Russia, outside of the Soviet Union, right? And so I think about that. And now during the same period, when Credit Lyonnais was lending out all this money in a crazy way to Apollo, they were also lending it to other companies. Adidas was one. But the biggest creditor was Robert Maxwell. And another one was Steve fucking Bannon. Steve Bannon got Credit Lyonnais money and moved his investment operation to Beverly Hills during the same period. And
imagine that.
I know. And then, finally the investigator, it took a while, but the investigators were like, we got to look into this Credit Lyonnais thing. And then the beautiful, giant, old, like revered building in the middle of Paris that was the headquarters of Credit Lyonnais just burned to the ground right before the investigators were going to knock on the door. And so we're never going to know what happened to Credit Lyonnais.
Was there a good investigation into that burning?
I don't think there was. There were people did go to prison, like not for the burning, but for running Credit Lyonnais in a fraudulent way. Like people, the executives did get in trouble, but $20 billion never found it. Just went missing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Fire ravages French bank headquarters May 5th. 1996. Remember?
Audio's coming soon.
5th of May.
There's some 96 with it.
Fire swept through the headquarters of France's beleaguered it was already beleaguered too. Funny. Yeah. Credit Lyonnais Bank Sunday, injuring at least 23 people, most of them firefighters. The blaze began in a computer room at around 8:30. Hard drives do burn very effectively. I've heard that.
Okay.
At 8:30 a.m. and about 300 firefighters had it under control 9 hours later. Wow. And so did this end the bank? Were they done after that?
I think so. We should double check that.
Yeah, let's check that. I should have. Credit Lyonnais history, because they still had, even with the fire, I imagine they still had assets, so someone had to buy them up. Like they bought up, like Barclays bought up Bear Stearns. Right. Was that it?
No, J.P. Morgan bought Bear Stearns.
J.P. Morgan brought up Bear Stearns. Barclays bought up Lehman Brothers.
Just like you said.
Yep. Credit Lyonnais did not technically go out of business, but was acquired and absorbed by Credit Agricole in 2003 following severe financial distress in the early 90s. The bank was rebranded as LCL in 2005, which continues to operate as a subsidiary of Credit Agricole Group. This is another way that things get lost to history. and rewritten. It's so simple, but just name changes.
Totally.
You know, like people don't think about where stuff comes from. Like you can follow the Rockefellers back and realize like, oh, JP Morgan Chase. It's got JP Morgan in there, but it doesn't have Rockefeller in there.
Totally.
You know what I mean? But David Rockefeller was like a guy who made them a powerhouse when it was, I forget what it was called, but it was called something else in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s.
So when Buzzy, our CA guy, was running a bank, that the one that took Microsoft public, it was called Alex Brown. Weird name. It was like Alex dot space Brown. I don't know why it's that way, but that's how it is. And then things got real confusing and kind of involved Russia, but then they sold it to Bankers Trust. And then Bankers Trust immediately became like a giant scandal that is not well told, but that involved Russia for sure. And then Bankers Trust quickly became Deutsche Bank, which created this acronym DBAB, which is Deutsche, what is it? DB, that doesn't make sense. It made a little acronym of like this is the new part of Deutsche Bank that used to be Bankers Trust. And if you search that in the Epstein files, like that's where Epstein banked. Like that's on files of Epstein banking transactions right now. Like this is where they banked. So part of me is like, I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean
The money we know about. Right?
Yeah. But definitely like those bankers were the ones that he had emailed with a lot. And that's where he got power of attorney over Leon Black's accounts, right? Is in like this little...
Wait, he got power of attorney over those? I don't remember that.
So he had, kind of blanket power of attorney for Leslie Wexner.
Yes.
But only from this most recent file dump did we learn that there's like emails from these Deutsche Bank bankers. And they're basically saying like, the paperwork is in like, so that Jeffrey Epstein now has authority to trade on behalf of Leon Black through Deutsche Bank.
I think you're spot on with what you said earlier. It's the compromated. Look for the compromat on the compromatee. And they just create a line. And Jeffrey Epstein's like, he looks like a diddler. All right. Got him. That toupee ain't passing in 1979. I do want to play with Leon Black's toupee, like toss it around. But that's... Wow.
I just learned a scandalous thing today that seems like something I should have known before, but apparently the redactions are not so great and some of the horrible pictures, which I frankly haven't looked up very much.
Horrible.
But apparently the Leon Black's penis is unredacted.
I didn't want to know that.
That was the facts, man.
I don't want to see that. He is accused, and I have to say accused, of some heinous things. I mean, stuff that... just awful things, man.
He's the proof that the judicial system is not working.
Yes.
Right? Like the fact that he hasn't been touched. I mean, he paid like $61.5 million to the Virgin Islands for something. They investigated a bunch, hauled him in and settled. But yeah, I mean, he checks every box of badness, right?
Yeah.
Funding Epstein's operation, credibly accused by multiple accusers.
How about paying him $170 million over 5 years for estate planning? Now, Leon Black today is worth $13.3 billion.
Yeah.
So he's worth a lot of money. There is no one on earth, maybe with the exception of Saudi oil guys Vladimir Putin and Elon Musk, who should ever be paying someone $170 million for estate planning. No, there's no one on earth. Yeah. I don't care how rich you are, right? Like, what the fuck is that? Have we ever traced what that really is?
Oh, what's this one?
What'd you pull up, Deef? You want to pull your mic in? Deef's just fucking rolling over here.
Yeah,
he's doing a whole investigation.
I wanted to look up those Deutsche Bank emails to see if I could find them, but instead I found this. This is a list of companies that they're requesting to close on July 8th, 2019. And you got some Epstein shells in there.
Wait a second. Who's go up? Who's
someone
requesting
named
it?
Kimberly Hart.
Kimberly Hart to Stuart Oldfield.
Stuart Oldfield is a Deutsche Bank banker.
Okay,
Mm.
there you go. You're on it. So CC'd Andrew Gallivan, Dawn Forbes, Daphne Kales, who may be their Deutsche Bank. I don't know. And then, so Darren Indyke was his attorney, I believe.
And this is urgent. Need to close accounts ASAP.
Please, and that's a day after he's arrested, right? Can we check that? He was arrested, I want to say, like July 7th. I hope I'm not making that up. What day was
Well,
he?
this is a
July
fast-
6th,
July
2019.
6th, so 2 days
This
afterwards.
is a fast. So this is probably like Deutsche Bank PR coming along with like, you guys
Get this shit off the balance sheet. What are the JSC Interiors? That's what I would name a shell company. LSJE LLC. Wait, LSJE JE Jeffrey Epstein. LS. Short for Leslie?
Seems like it's got to be someone with
Right.
an S last name, though, right?
Well, or it could be like LS, like Leslie. I don't know.
Yeah, it could
I'm
be.
just speculating,
Yeah,
people.
I'm with you.
Mort Inc., Neptune LLC, NES LLC. There it is. Zorro Management LLC, referring to Zorro Ranch. Wow. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.